Welcome to the College and Career Ready podcast, your go-to resource for all things related to preparing our students for success in their college and career journey. My name is Sonia Cacique, and I will be your host and guide on this exciting journey towards a bright future. Our mission is simple: to empower our parents and students by elevating their confidence and resourcefulness. We believe that you deserve all the tools and support necessary to open the doors to endless possibilities of success. And with our community, you don't have to do this alone. So come with me and let's get started. Well, hello and welcome to the College and Career Ready podcast. I'm your host, Sonia Cacique. Today, I have a special guest who will be open and vulnerable with us while sharing his college experience going to Columbia University. His story is a testament to the power of resilience, community, and a positive mindset. From the elation of acceptance to the loneliness of the first few weeks of college, he encountered daunting academic work, intense competition, and homesickness. But through these challenges, Andy found his community by joining student organizations and discovered the importance of having an open mind about different paths to success. Be inspired by Andy Garcia's journey through Columbia University in his pursuit of becoming a biomedical engineer. But first and foremost, to all of our parents, teens, and educators here with us today, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you. Your time is incredibly valuable, and I'm truly honored that you've chosen to spend it with us. Whether you are a parent supporting your child's educational journey, a student working hard to achieve your dreams, or an educator dedicated to shaping the minds of the next generation, your commitment to education is commendable, and it is what makes our community strong. As we embark on this podcasting adventure together, we aim to create an inclusive space that fosters learning, growth, just as we're going to do today. Fill you with inspiration by sharing stories of young, successful professionals and vulnerability and resiliency. But before we get started, friend, I do want to take a moment to reflect on the power of community. Together, we can achieve so much more than we could ever do alone. So if you find value in the conversations we have here, I encourage you to be an active participant in our growing community. It's super simple. All you have to do is subscribe and share. If you haven't already done so, please make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. And if you find our episode helpful and enlightening, please don't hesitate to share this podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues. Together, we can reach more people and make a broader impact. And speaking of community, I want to give a special thanks to one of our parent listeners, Dalia, who reached out to me sharing Andy's story. And without a doubt, I knew right then and there that I had to bring Andy to our podcast to share his career journey with us. So to Dalia, I want to say thank you for being part of our community. So without further ado, let's get started with Andy Garcia. Hi, Andy. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Sonia. Thank you so much for having me today. And it's truly a pleasure to be able to share some of my experiences with you and the audience that's going to listen to this.
So can you tell us a little bit about you, your background, your family?
Definitely. So, hi, folks. My name is Andy Garcia. I come from a family of educators, first-generation educators. And as Sonia mentioned earlier, I'm now a biomedical engineer and also a very, what's the word I want to use, very proud dog dad. I have a border collie and she's just bright, adds light to my days. On top of that, let's see, I'm a lifelong resident and I reside here now in Pasadena, Texas. I'm on the southeast side of Houston. I guess the only other thing that I could think is important is I have a deep passion for helping folks advance forward, and especially through education. I think education is a all-encompassing, very, very powerful tool. And that's why I think this podcast is a match made in heaven, to say the least.
Tell me about your career aspirations growing up.
Definitely. So yeah, my career story is See, I wish I could say it's interesting, but I don't know what other folks' career stories look like. I'll say that mine had kinks all the way around, right? I had this vision for myself, and as I grew up, it changed a bit. And as I continue to grow, it continues to change a little bit, which is probably common with a lot of folks. I just had this really set vision for myself for a long time. And that vision, ever since I was about 5, 6 years old, I wanted to be a medical doctor, a physician, and I wanted to be a pediatrician. And whenever I was at that young age, right, I had a really good physician, Dr. Beth Yip, was amazing. In the fourth grade, I had pneumonia, walking pneumonia, and I was just sick, but not in the hospital sick. And she did, just the way that she explained and rationalized my illness and what I needed to do to feel better. I was just amazing. Like the fact that she could break down such a complex topic to a 4 or 5 year old, and then that 4 or 5 year old understand it. My parents understand it. I thought that was just magical. And that was sort of the seed in my brain right there was like, I want to be a physician. And from that moment forward, science was my thing. I loved science. I loved reading too, but science, I wanted to know more and more about the human body as much as I could. And that track stayed with me through like all of high school, right? So as a high schooler, I had that same seed in my head. I want to go to medical school. I want to be a physician. And then my senior year of high school, if students are in advanced math classes, right, in high school, your senior year, you'll take calculus, which I was on that path. I took calculus, and to my surprise, I loved it, right? I loved everything about it. And I wasn't ready. In my mind at the time, I wanted to study either chemistry or biology. And I sort of saw calculus as the last math class I was going to take, and then I was going to depart into really science-heavy courses. And right before I started applying to colleges, sending in applications, I sort of made the decision, and I was like, you know what, I want to study engineering. I'm not ready to let go of math. I still am very much interested in the human body and the sciences, so I'm going to go for biomedical engineering. But, doing that, I get to keep math, I get to keep science, and I really took that forward with me. And then as a little nugget, right, I was like, if something happens in the next 4 years that I don't want to go to medical school or things don't pan out, I'm going to have a decent degree to fall back on, to fall upon, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of how I ended up on biomedical engineering. And that was at the end of my senior year. I like to explore things before I commit to them, right? So what I did my
Yes.
senior year of high school, I was looking for flying programs that, and these are like college university programs where they fly in students to their schools to visit them all on the school's dime. And what I did, I sort of came across, there was one student 3 or 4 years before I graduated from my high school, Pasadena Memorial, that did this program. And so I got in touch with her and asked her, where's the application? It's called the Columbia Engineering Experience. And on my birthday weekend, the October of my senior year of high school, right before college applications were being submitted, I was selected to go and visit Columbia University, visit New York City, and also visit the biomedical engineering program. And that was sort of where I got to meet professors, got to see what the labs looked like, and I was like, this is it. This is it for me. This is what I want to spend the next 4 years studying. And I would love to be in this place too.
That is amazing. So tell me a little bit more. What was that program? Was it one program specifically, or they outsource you to any university that you're interested in?
A specific program. It's called CE Squared Columbia Engineering Experience, and it's specific to underserved students and or minority students who have an interest in studying engineering at the post-secondary level. And, they convene students from all across the country. And that was the one that I went to, right? But there's a few other ones. I know MIT has a couple, but Columbia's is sort of unique in the sense that it's very last minute, right? Like it's right before your college applications are sent in.
Yeah.
Versus MIT, they have, I don't know what it stands for, but MOSTEC was one that I heard that they had. MITES is another one. And these are things that you spend part of your summer before your senior year of high school doing. Same premise, but different delivery.
I love you sharing this because hopefully it gives students and parents a little bit of a sigh of relief. I feel personally there's so much pressure, sometimes even at the 8th grade level or 9th grade level, to know not only what career you want to pursue, but where you want to go, what college, what university. And that is a lot of pressure that our students, I feel, should not have to have at that age.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunities will be there when they are ready. Because honestly, true story, when I was reading your resume, I was like, oh, he probably wanted to go to Columbia University since like 9th grade, and he's been preparing all his life to go to Columbia University.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good area that we can talk a bit about, that pressure and that stress. And I can at least speak to what that looked like for me. I think at the 8th grade level, going into 9th grade, I very much had the knowledge of what college was like, right? And had an expectation that I was going to go to college. And that was about it. My freshman year of high school, in my one of my Spanish classes, one of our task assignments was to sort of give a presentation or report on a college of our choice.
Okay.
And so I had this assignment in my hands that I could have fun with. And I was like, I've heard that there's schools up in the Northeast that are like fancy and they cost a lot. They're this, they're that. Which one's the one I know least about? And can I do a presentation about it? And I ended up choosing Dartmouth College, one of the Ivy League schools. I didn't know much about it at the time. And so I just did it to learn more about it. And in that assignment, right, in the process of that project, I learned a bit more about, the financial aid programs that these schools offer, as well as what their philosophy is towards building a class and what that looks like for the student experience. And sort of at the ninth grade, I was like, okay, I think I want to go to one of these schools. But at the same time, I'm very, as optimistic as I think I am, I'm very rational as well. And I mean, those numbers are just, they're horrifying, right? There's no other way to say it, right? Like it feels like it doesn't matter what you do, you're throwing a shot in the dark. And I was very much aware of that. And I was not willing to, to put that upon myself and have to carry that for 4 years, day in and day out. And so what I thought was, right, in my mindset at the time was sort of, I'm going to do the best that I can in my courses, find a passion here that I can then take with me to college and build experiences, right, as much as I can. And I wish I'd been able to build more experiences academically. I think that's one of the biggest things coming from quote unquote underserved areas. You don't get access to just really cool things. Some of my classmates did things like research in the summers and or went to summer camps, and I didn't really have that experience as much as I would have loved it, and I didn't even know where to start to look for them. So I think ignorance was bliss for me at that time, but I think there's also enough to learn there, right? What matters truly is that you make the most of the cards that are dealt to you, and just keep the vision forward, and these are your options, and that you're going to be shooting for them. You're shooting for the moon. Even if you don't get there, you're going to find yourself amongst the stars.
No, absolutely. And I concur with that because, not that the passion shouldn't be there. It's just open yourself to the different possibilities that there could be. If you were to focus yourself just on one sole university, and then what if you don't get in, which, is a possibility. I love that you shared about the experiences. And honestly, Andy, you having done this summer program on your senior year was amazing, because a lot of students probably until today that you are sharing this didn't even know about that as an option.
I agree. It's a very, what's the word I want to use? It's not well marketed. It's not the most marketed, right? Students get invited to it based on probably PSAT scores. And I don't even think that's true, actually. I don't know how they sort of send it out and invite and, who gets that. But if you Google it up, it's open for anyone to apply to. And all you need is the spark of knowledge, right? To know that it exists.
Yeah.
And then just go forward and apply.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So you don't know this, but I will say that we have a guest coming in the next couple of weeks who is specifically going to be talking about her program that they offer at her campus. And again, we're opening that door to many other students. And some of the criteria that she was mentioning was not actually high GPA. Hi, friend. Before we dive back into today's engaging discussion, we have an exciting announcement to make. Are you eager to stay up to date with the latest college and career ready news, insightful blogs, and gain early access to the following week's episode topic? Well, we've got just the thing for you. I'm thrilled to introduce our College and Career Ready newsletter. By joining our community, you'll be part of a vibrant group of parents and students with aspirations of being college and career ready. Plus, you'll get exclusive access to all the valuable resources we have to offer. So, how do you join? It's simple. Just head over to collegecareerready.org, all one word, collegecareerready.org, and navigate to the resource tab. There, you'll find a sign-up link to our newsletter. It's quick and easy to join, and it's the best way to stay connected with us and elevate your college and career journey. Join us today at collegecareerready.org and click on the resource tab where you can sign up to our newsletter. We can't wait to welcome you into our community. Thank you for being part of our podcast family. And now back to the show.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? I think it's amazing what the power of experience and how you convey that, right? To show folks that these are the cards I've been dealt with. This is how I've managed them, and this is how I plan to go forward with that. And, if you have a command of that, I think you can do anything you set your mind to.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. So you decided to go to Columbia University. Tell me about your experience there. And then also share with us if that was a financial burden for your family or how you were able to finance your education.
Definitely. So I think I'm going to start with the financial aspect because
Mm-hmm.
so whenever I started looking at colleges, I knew that they were expensive. I knew that loans existed. I didn't understand much about them in high school, right, in my head. And that's probably, most high schoolers now probably have a much better sense than I did at the time of loans. It was a black box. You asked for money, money came out the other end, and you made it to college that way, right?
Yeah.
But I did know at the time that the Ivy League schools and then their peer schools gave substantial amounts of financial aid. And that was sort of in my head. I was like, I love to, I'm an achieving student, a high achieving student. I love studying and learning things. And if that's not enough for me to want to go to these campuses, another plus is that it's going to likely have, and I say likely, right, because I didn't really know what that would look like and I hadn't told my parents yet to, let's go run the calculations and run the numbers. But in my head, I was like, it could probably help my parents and me, right, in the future have not much of a financial burden in going to college because of the generous financial aid policies that all of these schools have and grown truly. And so I sort of had that in mind as I was looking at these schools and as I was going through college. And whenever the time came around, it just worked out that the price that I got quoted was the price I ended up paying for Columbia was slightly less expensive than what I would have done here. And I think another important aspect about the finances, right, is it's not, I feel like parents, just look at finances and it's very easy to cross things out. But to the contrary, I would say that it's so difficult to compare financial aid packages apples to oranges, right? I don't think I would compare Columbia's financial aid packages and what they offer to UT or U of H because there's different tiers, right? So if you're a top student applying to Columbia, your goal there is likely getting in, right? And that's not guaranteed. If you're a top student applying to U of H, you're still taking all of those characteristics that make you a candidate to Columbia or other top schools to these schools. And the odds are that you may be able to get, a full ride scholarship at U of H, the presidential scholarship, or at UT, the 40 acre scholarship. And they're just as great. You're just in a different environment, different school. But I think that makes it very difficult to compare financial aid packages apples to oranges. It's very much a student-centric approach that I think should be taken and asking yourself, what is it that I want to get out of college? Maybe what I want to do next, but even then that's probably too much, but just thinking, what do you want to get out of this experience, right? And what do you want to leave with? And I think that that's a good stimulus to, go forward from.
Yeah. So were you offered financial assistance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So I got need-based financial assistance, which is the only financial assistance that Ivy League schools provide. The financial aid that they give is very generous. I want to say that today it's something like if your total family income is anywhere less than $200,000, you pay nothing in tuition, right? So then you're only talking about room and board, and that's maybe like 20,000, 15 to 20,000, if that. And then after your freshman year, you can move off campus if you're, well, not at Columbia, but at some of the other schools that offer generous financial aid, and that lowers your cost even further. College is definitely a huge expense, and it's very difficult to estimate that. And I very much see why it's a big anxiety for families, truly.
Yeah, absolutely. And who helped you with your financial aid?
My dad. So my dad, he handles for the most part all of the income tax that my family reports, and the income tax reports are very closely tied to the FAFSA, right? And so it was sort of just plug and chug for him. It was very easy. Through my senior year of college, it was interesting because I went to school with and I befriended a lot of folks that were lower income, that were first generation, and they were the ones handling all this stuff. And I would sit there with them and support them as much as I could. But I would look at them in the eyes and tell them, you know this so much better than I do. I was like, we're going to call my dad and ask him what he does because my senior year of college, I would just remind him, hey, Dad, I think this is due. And a couple of hours later, he would be able to submit it. So that was, blessing in disguise for me. But definitely, there's resources and folks that are willing to help if that's something that's foreign to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what was your experience at Columbia University? I mean, it's the only place you know, so you can't compare, but what was your experience there?
So my experience it was interesting. So going into Columbia, I was very excited to move into New York City, right? And like you mentioned earlier, you mentioned something to the point of it's difficult whenever you have a dream school. It's a single dream school because, if you don't get in it can crush your dreams, right? I was very cognizant of that as a senior in high school. And even now, as I look to postgraduate education, I am not going to prescribe, this is the school I want to go to. It doesn't matter what school it is, because if they don't take me, I don't want to be heartbroken, right? I want to be able to step beyond that and go forward with my dreams in another capacity. So Columbia wasn't my dream school, but whenever I found out I got accepted, it became my dream school. I was like, this is like happening to me. I'm going to New York City. I'm going to spend 4 years in New York City. And this is going to be magical because I come from the suburbs in a city that Houston is just not at all as urban as New York. So I was just excited beyond words. And from the moment I got accepted to pretty much the moment that I left to New York City was a fever dream. It was just me like, everything is like set. I can see what the future is going to look like for the next 4-ish years, and I'm just going to enjoy this victory for a little bit, right? And that's exactly what I did. And then upon arriving over there, that was sort of an interesting experience, a very rough start. So Columbia has a 1 week orientation program for first years prior to the start of classes. My family was able to go and drop me off, say their goodbyes. That Columbia had all these convocations and family send off and dinner, and so they got to experience New York for a week too. Um, but after they left, it was so lonely, like lonely. I vividly remember that. And I will always say that what's the word I want to use? The week that I didn't, the most despised week in my entire 4 years at Columbia was that first week whenever I got left over there. It was just so, I felt out of place. Making friends, all of the friendships I made felt so superficial. And on top of that, just there was nothing that reminded me of home. The food, Mexican food even over there didn't taste the same as food here. So I was just so homesick. And I didn't know that I was homesick because I had never felt homesick. So I was just like, something's so wrong. And at the same time, I had these expectations for myself of, you have this gift of being able to be here. You have to push all of that aside and just focus, right, on being able to produce. And it was very rough, right? It was rough just adjusting to being in New York so quickly. And that sort of continued for the first 2 years of undergrad.
Oh,
My undergrad
wow.
was a really long time for me, but it became easier with time, of course. The other aspect to that, though, is academics. The academics were just rigorous beyond anything I had, faced and really what I had been prepared for. It was used to having 1 or 2 classes that even if they were difficult, I could, quote unquote, blow off, right? Call them blow off classes and just relax a bit. That was not at all a reality for me once I got to school over there in New York. And I was doing everything that I had done in Houston and then in Pasadena, I should say, tutoring, learning things on my own through the internet, reading textbooks, and then even new strategies, forming study groups where I could. And I struggled so much. It didn't matter how much I tried. For some of my courses, my max efforts would still put me at the bottom end of the class. And not even,
Wow.
the last batch. And it took me a while to realize, then by a while, I should say probably that full first year to realize, hey, this isn't like your fault, right? It speaks nothing about what you're capable of and what
Correct.
you bring to the table. It's just look at the competition you're facing. Some of these classes are curved. Some of these students are taking this class for the second, third time, right? And they took it back in 8th grade, wherever they went to school. And that was, just a big adjustment because for so long I had tied some of my worth to my academic achievement because of growing up, if you don't have to worry about helping out your family, which I didn't have to, in terms financially, right?
Mm-hmm.
School was my only obligation and I excelled in that. And so that was just a huge rift that I had to sort of just, what's the word, wade through, power through
Uh-huh.
those first 2 years, truly. And then the last 2 years, there was definitely some improvement. So that second year, I like to say I hit rock bottom academically because I got put on academic probation after having failed a couple of courses a semester.
Okay.
And these were, just difficult courses. It was Physics 3, which was modern physics and light and optics, sort of the forefront of physics knowledge. The other one was, and this actually still saddens me to this day, just because there's so much work that needs to be done in this space, coding. It was a basic course for coding in Python. And this was an easy course for my classmates. Those assignments that I spent a week, 2 weeks on and still couldn't finish, they would do it in 10 minutes, like nothing. And it was because they had been exposed to coding in the 8th grade. Some of them as young as like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And it was second nature to them. Like it was like writing in English versus for me, it was like learning Mandarin, like a language I've
Mm-hmm.
never spoken. It was crazy. And that wide disparity in my awareness of it, I felt
Mm-hmm.
powerless and like I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
any avenues to go out of. And it was very easy to say, had I been exposed to this in high school, I probably would have done better. The same way that I saw in my physics courses, I struggled with physics so much in high school. But that didn't matter because when I got to college, I wasn't seeing topics for the first time, and I was able to, stay on top of things, at least for the foundations of physics. So I got put on academic probation, and then I sort of that was after my first semester of my sophomore year of college. In that month-ish long winter break, I took some time to just sit outside and figure out, what's my forward plan. Well, A, to realize how I got to where I was, right? And then figure out what are my next steps, how I can remedy this. And I had this amazing plan for myself as to how I was going to show Columbia, they were going to get me off of academic probation this next semester, that my GPA was going to get boosted. I had this perfect plan for how those classes were going to help me. That plan didn't get to come to fruition because like a month and a half into that next semester, COVID was a thing.
Ah,
And we got sent home. Well, no, there was
ah,
just a lot of craziness, a lot of uncertainty. And, the final say was, you're going to go study at home for the remainder of the semester. And that's exactly what happened. I was in the process. I had this perfect plan. I had, moved classes around I was a little bit more experienced in the way that, Columbia manages their courses and what those offerings look like. And so I put
mm-hmm.
quote unquote easier courses. And all of that got thrown to the trash because that semester became study at home. It became pass fail. It wouldn't be counted for your GPA. So I was able to get off of academic probation, and I had this renewed confidence in my academic capacities because I was doing great, but I didn't have any numbers to show for it, right? Like there was none of that was calculated into my GPA. But it sort of put me on my 2 feet again, and I felt stable enough to go into that last half of my undergraduate experience, not as shaky as I had been at the beginning and that second year too, really. And so going into my third year, all of my junior year I studied virtually. That first semester I believe it was mandatory virtually for everyone. As New York City was sort of ground zero really in the world for having COVID, and they didn't want to have to, the school didn't want to have to deal with having students on campus. So that first semester I didn't have much of a choice. The second semester, I did have a choice, but I was still very much grappling with feelings of homesickness, and I wasn't too homesick at that point. I had gotten used to it, and I was very excited for New York City, right? But COVID was still a thing. I knew what living over there would look like. Would I choose to go for that semester? And I thought that it was best for me to stay here at home and dive into some other projects here at home and study from home. And I thought that was perfect, and it worked out great for me. So I did that, and just classes were normally graded. They were just as rigorous as before. Just things were virtual, but it was a definitely unique experience. I solidified my footing. These were all biomedical engineering courses, so I was very much learning the meat of what I went to college to study for. And at the same time, getting tired of being at home and wanting to go see the world, right? I was about to turn 22ish years old, and I was over the things that worried me when I was 18 and 19, and I was ready to go back to New York and really get to explore the city and get to put my best foot forward at the time, and just grow personally. I was like, I'm gonna graduate in a year, and whatever happens after happens after. In that mess, I had decided that I wasn't going to apply to medical school, so I knew that I was going to be using my BME degree in an engineering capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of went forward with that and decided that that was sort of how things were going to play out for the next 2, 3 years. And yeah, I went to college that senior year, and that was also a fever dream. Just amazing, great memories. Sort of full circle to my academic moments. At that point, I was taking graduate level courses in biomedical engineering because the way that they structured the program at Columbia was prerequisites, upper level prerequisites, junior, freshman and sophomore year, junior year, basics and foundations of biomedical engineering, senior year, specialize in whatever subfield of BME you want to. And you get to take graduate level courses, right, with master's and PhD students. And I was a little worried about that, but I was like, I'll be fine. I was more than fine. I excelled in them. My grades were amazing. And it was sort of that full circle moment. And looking back, it just so much pride because I know how difficult it was for me at the beginning, even for that beginner's Python course. And one of the courses I took my senior year was another coding course in genomics. And, the pride I felt just being able to complete those assignments on my own in a reasonable amount of time and understand what I was doing, do it right. It was just, I always thought back to the Andy that failed that very basic introductory Python coding
Yeah.
years prior. And, that was a great experience academically. Outside of academics, that was also another story. I spoke about the academics of being a Colombian, all of that rocky path. The other thing, right, was very much the personal growth and finding community in New York and just growing as a person, right? Because that's very much something you get in going to college, and especially so whenever you're moving away for college on your own.
And I'm going to pause you there for just a second, because that is actually what I'm going to be transitioning in But before we leave the academics, let's go a little bit back, because one thing that you said, we were mentioning about when a door closes, when you have your mindset on one thing, I always want to encourage all students, remind all students that when one door closes, there's probably a bigger door ready for you, but it cannot come until that first door is closed.
Agreed, completely agree. And you grow a lot through that experience and you learn things, and then you get to go forward with that. Just having a growth mindset is so important. I think another thing to mention about those new doors, right, is just keeping an open mind, right? Just knowing that because you failed once doesn't mean you're going to fail again. You can always give it a second shot, even if you have to, like I did to get my degree. But even beyond that, looking for other opportunities, for different paths, because in most things in life, right, it's the path to any destination isn't homogenous, right? There's so many different ways to get there. And I think that just taking the less beaten path definitely it makes for a more salient experience, and a much more experienced individual once you reach that destination.
Absolutely. And the other thing, well, there's two other things that I wanted to bring back to our conversation was homesickness. Looking back, is there anything you think you should have done differently to help you prepare for that time away? Because for a student, you can be homesick even if you are 2 hours away from home. The feeling is the same, whether it's 2 hours or it's, a flight away from home. How would you, or what would you recommend students for that?
Definitely. I think for me, the quote unquote remedy for my homesickness was being able to find a community and, reaching out to folks, finding genuine friends. And that first week was just crazy because I didn't know if I had made any friends, and building that community regardless of what it means. And you asked in particular, what can students do to prepare, which I thought was interesting because my gut instinct was, you can't really, but then I actually take that back now. And I think that the figuring out how to be, how to socialize with folks, how to find folks that you like to get along with. What are the qualities and people that you like, right? Because you're going to be more likely than not, you're going to be very much in a new environment. Definitely, actually, no matter where you go to school, you're going to be in a new environment. You're going to be around new faces, and having in your toolkit, right, that knowledge of the types of people you like to hang around with, the ways you make new friends, like that's all very helpful because that's also important to finding a community away from home and then sort of placing yourself in that community away from home.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about that. How did you start making friends?
I think the most important thing, or the most straightforward path, right, to finding that community is joining student organizations, right? These are campus university funded groups that's built around identities or interests or activities even. And they're just like-minded people, and just put yourself out there and join orgs and get involved with them. And there's so many things whenever you get to college, right? There's cultural groups and there's interest-based groups. Let's say if you like, I don't know, building rockets, or activity-based, right? Like ballroom dancing. And for me, I, for the most part, steered clear of all student groups the first few years. But those last 2 years, I sort of knew what I needed for, or what I was looking for to feel more at home. And it was really finding a sense of community over there. And for me, that primary meaning was my Mexican American identity and Latinidad in general. So I got very involved with cultural student groups. And at first it was just one. It was the Chicano Student Caucus at Columbia, Mexican American students. And I was just show up as a general body member, and they did things. They had teach-ins talking about culturally significant events in Mexico, things like the Ayotzinapa 43 students that went missing. But it was also just very much laid back events, right? Stay with pan dulce, which I had no idea where to get pan dulce in New York. So I would just show up, and I was like, this feels like home, right? These folks, they feel like home, even though they're not from Texas. They relate to my experiences and the same type of food that I eat with my family, and they can cook food that I can't, that my parents do. And that sort of opened the door to community. And then using that really good experience, I branched out to other things. It branched to one of the most significant experiences of my undergraduate experience, which was spending my senior year living in a special interest community called Casa Latina, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a university-owned brownstone that houses 18, I believe, students that are Latino identifying, and really just gives the community the Latino community of Columbia space, right? So all student orgs that were culturally affiliated with any Latino identity that was their space. That was our students' space. And I was able to live on the third floor for all of that year. And so that was just an amazing experience, right? It was like I truly found a second family. And those are the friends that I stick with. And I see, I go to New York pretty often now to see them because everyone stayed over there except for me. And they're the friends that will be at each other's weddings. And that was where sort of that magic came from. And all of that sprouted just from being in those identity community-based student groups that sort of just opened up different paths for me and really helped me to feel at home in a place that wasn't at all like home.
Yeah. So for our audience, pan dulce is sweet bread.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. And also for point of reference to our audience, we're speaking about Columbia University, but the student organization groups are at all universities and colleges. And what Andy mentioned is very important. Finding a group that you identify with, whatever that is. It could be ethnic, it could be culture, it could be special interest. And if one doesn't work out, it's okay. Go to another one until you find one that fits right. And I think that's key to any student going to any university or college. So the last thing I wanted to go back so we can talk about academic stress you had, performance. What were those things that you learned that you thought, wow, if I should have done this earlier, this could have helped me? Because you're right. Some students might come to a class or a couple of courses where they're not as prepared as other students. So what could we learn from that experience?
Yeah, I thank you for asking that question because it shines light on another very important part of my college experience. And so you mentioned academic stress, and I truly right. There's different stressors in college, and I think that advice for handling stress applies generally. But for me, my biggest stressor definitely was academics because of the pressure I put on myself, and despite the fact that it's so difficult to adjust, I was like, it doesn't matter. Like I'm here to study, and in X years, right, I'm going to be gone, and I'm supposed to have a degree, and that's like what's paramount, right? Studying. And so the biggest stressor I faced was passing my classes, doing good in my classes. And more than that, understanding that I was learning that is just still very important to me. And so I guess to backtrack a little bit, when I was in high school, I was very much a bookworm, a social bookworm, but not at all an athlete. No sports, none of that, right? And I thought that I was going to live my life like that and that was going to be great. And it wasn't until I got that first semester of my sophomore year of college, there was one student org that I had joined immediately upon Columbia. I entered Columbia and I stayed with it for 4 years. It was a mentoring program, also based on identity. So it was a family tree of Latinos, and I got paired with a mentor my first year, and then I was a mentor to a mentee. I was involved with the leadership of that group, but I made I don't want to say they were friends at the time, because another thing is I was sort of a barrier to myself in finding community. I was like, this is foreign, it's not home. I'm not going to try to make it home because this is not my home. And in doing so, it was backstabbing because I was going against what I really needed to do and find a community to feel at home. And so those acquaintances, now they're friends, but at the time acquaintances, they noticed that I sort of was struggling to get along with my classes and to sort of have a life outside of academics. And they also knew how difficult it was just to pass and to do things at school. So they were sort of like, Andy, like, what's going on? And so one fateful December night, that first semester of my sophomore year of college, one of my friends saw me very stressed out about an exam. And she was like, Andy, I was in jeans and we were studying in the kitchen of the suite I lived in, sorry.
Uh-huh.
And I was in jeans and she was like, Andy, come on, follow me. We're going to go somewhere. Mind you, I hadn't explored New York City too much at that point because I was like, I'm here for a mission, right? I go out to eat and explore a little bit there, but I don't want to see, like I hadn't gone to Central Park before then, except to walk outside on the outskirts, but I hadn't gone in it. And so she takes me to Central Park and then she's like, starts picking up her pace and starts running. And I'm like, what are you doing, Julieta? And she's like, we're running down the length of Central Park. And I was like, I never ran in high school. I still don't run. I didn't really exercise in high school and I'm in jeans. She's like, I don't care. Like, come on, just keep up with me. It's 3 miles. We're going to get it done. So I'm running with a friend, right? And I was like, I'm not going to embarrass myself. I'm going to keep on going. Like, I'm not going to, if we have to stop, it's because Julieta stops. And thank God we stopped a few times because of her. She probably saw how I was struggling. She's like, yeah, I'm going to slow down for Andy. But we ran all the way down. And then at the end, she's like, how do you feel? And I was just breathing heavily, trying to catch my breath. And I was like, I can barely breathe, but I feel like euphoric. Everything's amazing. My concerns are gone. She's like, that, Andy, is like the magic of exercise. She's like, welcome to running. We're going to start doing this more often. From that point forward, I fell in love with running. I still run to
Oh,
this day. From then on, after that, I was like, oh, I want to go touch a weight at the gym. Like, what does that have the same effect? Does getting on a bike, and doing it strenuously, does that have the same effect? And that's what I tell my little cousins, my family members that are in college now. They asked how do I deal with the stress? I was like, if running's not your thing, which it might not be, right? That's great. Get on a stationary bicycle and just pedal. And if you're like, do it commensurate to your stress. If you're very stressed, pedal to the metal, and whenever you're out of breath, slow down and just focus on breathing and give your body a physical instead of this mental stress, right? Give yourself a stress that you're placing on yourself because of the activity you're doing. And that sort of it really grounds your mind, right? And that's why I say it was super impactful, because
yeah.
I still do it to this day. Earlier, I had just this crazy day running around. An hour ago, I was on the Peloton, bicycling like crazy because it was going to make me forget about any stressors.
You
And
were
then
stressed about this podcast interview.
right. So I was like, oh, I should have looked at those, like the questions. And I was like, I got this. I was like, I'm going to get on the bike though. I was like, I'm going to get on the bike to burn off some steam and then I'll be good. And so I think that's really useful. If you're not a
Yeah.
student athlete, you just don't get to see the benefits, right? And if you're a student athlete, that's amazing because you get to reap those benefits in high school. But I didn't get to because I wasn't, and I was also very hard-headed and chose to not exercise. But I think number one, right, take care of yourself and
Mhm.
put some physical stressors on your body.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And this goes for us, whether we're young or older, but for our high school students, this is a perfect time to identify what is it that helps you relieve stress. Because even though maybe quote unquote high school would not be as stressful, it is for some it isn't, still know and identify what actually helps you decrease your stress or alleviate the stress. So you have the tools ready when you get to college or your career or anything else in life. What about academic tools, academic strategies? Did you do anything different for that?
Definitely. I before we move to that, I did want to go back to your last point,
Yeah.
and just add that in high school, there's, like you mentioned, varying levels of stress. And for some students, when I was in high school, I very much remember I was stressed, but not stressed to the level I was in college. Hence, I didn't have to find that like extra thing. And if you're a high schooler in that position, right, I very much recommend, like, yeah, you can live with that stress. Yes, you can handle it, but you're gonna come across stressors at some point. Maybe not. Maybe it won't even be in college for you, right? But maybe
Uh-huh.
it'll be after. Practice those skills while you still can, whenever you still have that sort of breathing room. Just figure out what it is that de-stresses you. I think that's, instead of waiting until it's an SOS and you really need to figure out, because like everything's like crumbling, right? So I think it's important to take advantage of those things that are stressors to you but not the max stressors, and just use them as scenarios to go figure out what it is, because you'll feel, regardless of what the level of stress is, you're still going to feel relief. So I think that that's super
Absolutely.
important.
Good point. Good point. And so as far as academic tools and
Yes.
strategies,
So academic tools. So most colleges now offer different, at the bare minimum, right? You're going to be getting office hours from your professors. And I didn't take advantage of that until my junior year. Just different things like social anxiety and, wanting to reach out to folks and asking for help. But that's always on top of being a great way to see a professor teach in a different light and give advice and one-to-one, that sort of thing. You also get to build really good relationships with them that are useful both in postgraduate study or postgraduate applications, and also just having a friend on campus, right? As someone who works there and who's a mentor and a teacher to you. I think that's very important. Outside of that, though, and before I started going to office hours, I took advantage, like, and my credit passing some of my classes to tutoring. Some schools will offer free tutoring, and that's exactly for my freshman year of multivariable calculus. It was that first semester. And I remember thinking, I might fail this course. And I remember thinking, it's okay because I know I'm giving it my all. And if I fail, it's because, like, it was out of my control. I was truly giving it my all. And to that point, I started looking around for different resources, and I got pointed by my academic advisor to seek out this free tutoring service that they offered. And so this was a student who was able to tutor me and pass me his notes, went through problems with me, and that I think that's why I passed that course. I learned everything, but just the way that course was structured, it was so helpful to be able to go through that in another way. Another tool that helped, and I personally didn't make much use of it until my senior year, senior design course, where I was sort of forced to work with a team. But some people really do well working with teams and having teamwork and study groups. And everyone is going to tell you, form a study group. And for the most part, they are very beneficial. And if you can fit in with one, and you learn that way best, because it's also very dependent on whether or not that's your learning style. go and learn with the group, right? And figure out a way to structure, I don't know, a bi-weekly or every 3 week type of meeting with a group of people who are in the same class. And what do you understand? What do you understand? Look at those different gaps and patchwork them together, right? That's super important.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll add, like sort of related to study groups, when you find a community on campus, right, or wherever you are, where you find a community, I think it's also helpful, even if you're not, so like at Casa Latina, I was one of two engineers there. However, all the other folks were studying the liberal arts, one of them, or a handful of hard sciences. We didn't have much overlap to study together, but it very much helps you when you're struggling and when you're studying and just getting your community in a room, right? And just studying together and having a good time. Everyone's doing their own thing, but you're going through that experience together. And maybe not all the time, so you don't get too distracted and you get stuff done, but definitely whenever finals come around, whenever the pressure's really there and there's so much at stake, it's nice to be able to just let loose a bit in a high pressure environment. And I think plugging your community in outside of like your community, not non-academic community, whether that's family, whether that's friends you've made in college, and studying together, that's a nice way to blow off some steam and also get stuff done.
Yeah, I love that. And in reference to the finding your resources and everything that's available at the college, I'm going to sound like a sounding board through all my episodes because I don't think students can hear it enough. There's been so many interviews that I've had with other guests, and we keep repeating the same thing. The resources are there. The resources are there. But you do have to self-advocate and you do have to look out for them yourselves because the resources don't come to you. You have to go to the resources.
Definitely. And I think for me, right, one of the reasons why it took me so long to get office, I was just embarrassment, right? And not, being vulnerable with a professor, with someone stranger, even someone you look up to and saying, I don't understand this. I sit in your classes, I do all the work, I've done it for hours, I don't get it. And just having this fear that maybe they're going to call you, think you're dumb or this or that, right? And I think the important thing is just to leave that behind, right? Leave it aside and leave your expectations aside and just go with what you know and what you have. Don't go empty-handed. I'll say that, right? Unless you're truly empty-handed. And if you are, right, you go and say, I've done this, this, and this. I still don't have anything to show because I really don't get this. Can you help me? And I think that something about 90%, if not 95% of professors are going to help you because they're there.
Absolutely.
And they teach, right, because they have a passion for teaching. And just it's that barrier, that personal barrier. It was a huge barrier for me and to my own detriment.
Well, it's an ego thing too. It affects your ego. And I want to tell this to the audience. You don't have to do it alone. We are there's certain personalities that just tend to do this a little more than others that is like, no, I got this. I got this. I can't ask for help. I can do it. But you don't have to. You don't have to do it alone. Plus, when we're talking about study groups, there's two things that happen. You offer knowledge in what you know, which is really reinforcing your learning. And then you're getting help from the things that you don't know, which is reinforcing the other person's learning as they're describing it to you. And sometimes it's just seeing the same problem from a different perspective or a different set of eyes or a different set of lenses that you're like, oh, I get it. It makes sense now. So sometimes the answer is like right there, right in front of you, but you just need somebody else to help you see it through a different set of lenses.
Definitely. And for folks, like to rationalize stuff, it's like you're never going to hurt yourself by asking for too much help, but you will be harming yourself if you're not getting the help and you need it, right? And just err on the side of caution. You have nothing to lose, but so much to gain.
Absolutely. So, Andy, I really appreciate you sharing your vulnerability. It takes a lot to be open and honest about the experiences you've had, the difficulties, because it's so easy for others to shine light on them when things are going great. Sometimes it's like, oh, everything's going great for everybody else except me. Yeah. So I appreciate this. I think students need to hear this. They need to hear from you. They need to hear from our community that are vulnerable and that are willing to share resources and expertise so we can shorten their path. So they don't have to go through the struggles that we do. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here with us. And yeah, this is an open door for you. And we look forward to having you again to share with us more about your career as a biomedical engineering and what you have for the near future.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope this is helpful to the folks. So like you mentioned, Sonia, it's so important to shorten the path for others. And so that they don't repeat the same mistakes because it's needless, right? And that's just paramount to me because I think everyone can agree, right, that if someone's made a mistake and you can learn enough from it, whether it's by conversation or through, just being close to someone, it saves, it pushes that person, that everyone behind them, their family, that much further. And it just makes that path easier. And who knows where they're going to end up, right? And I think that there's magic there. It's powerful. It's amazing. It's very important. And that's exactly where I love to just shine light on everything and be vulnerable as much as I can.
I love it. Thank you, Andy, and we'll be in touch soon. Hi, friends. I hope you found Andy's story inspirational. And we will be having Andy in a second episode where he will be sharing more about his career as a biomedical engineer. So please make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get alerted when that is released. And if you haven't done so yet, please make sure you send this episode to a friend so we can continue to grow our community. I will talk to you next Tuesday. As always, my friend, be well, stay present, and don't forget to enjoy the journey. I'll talk to you soon. Hi, friend. Thank you for listening in. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much to me if you share it with a friend. Send it to them right now, or even better, tag me on your Instagram story so I can personally thank you for helping me build our community. I'm so thankful for each and every one of you. Let's keep in touch and I'll talk to you soon. Adios.